We will be led by Susan Yoshihara from the Center for Family and Human Rights, or CFAM, as you've noticed already. She is the Senior Vice President for Research and Director of the International Organizations Research Group. So, I won't take up any more of her time. She has a lot of great material to share with us, speaking about innovation and strategic planning. So I'll just turn the time back over to Susan.
Thank you very much. We had a couple more people come in. We were just kind of going around and talking about ourselves. Where are you coming from?
I'm from Ontario.
Okay.
Pauline.
Another Canadian in the room?
Yeah, I'm a Canadian.
We have all the Canadians over on that side today.
Wow.
Come on in. Great. And how about you, sir? Where are you from?
From Hong Kong.
From Hong Kong. Okay. Great. Got a big group coming. Come on in. We got plenty of seats in front. And where are you from?
From Guatemala.
From Guatemala. Aha, okay. 1, 2 more Guatemalans. How about you?
Mexico.
Mexico. Very good.
Argentina.
Argentina. All right, so we got all the Latin Americans came in at once. Mexico. Canada. Okay, all the Canadians on that side. What's going on? Okay. I don't know. And all right, so sir, where are you coming from today?
Massachusetts.
Oh, very good. I'm from Rhode Island.
Hey, neighbor.
Or southern Massachusetts, as some of the Massachusetts say. All right, good. Well, let's get started. So we had a brief introduction. I'll talk a little bit more about myself later, but I have to start with some pretty bad news. And that is that plans are worthless. So if you were thinking of a magic plan to get you out of whatever pickle you're going to get yourself into in this pro-family business, it's not going to work. And that's not my advice. That's the advice of one of a great American strategist, Dwight D. Eisenhower. Can anybody tell me when this photo was taken? Hey, yeah, I tricked you. 1957, actually. He was president by then. He was actually looking in retrospect. Anybody recognize, can you guess what day this was? Somebody mentioned it earlier this morning. I think it was your boss who mentioned this day.
D-Day.
D-Day. This is D-Day, and those are paratroopers, so very likely that not many of them survived that day. But what Eisenhower was saying, all those years later in retrospect, is that the first thing you do in an emergency is take all of your plans off the top shelf and you throw them away.
In an emergency, you said?
Yes. For example, in a war, or in the new fight that we find ourselves in the new climate that we find ourselves in here in the United States. And I want to read this. I want to read what he said, so you believe it. He said, the first thing you do is take all the plans off the top shelf and throw them out the window and start once more. But if you haven't been planning, you can't start to work. Intelligently, at least. That is the reason it's so important to plan. To keep yourself seeped in the character of the problem that you may one day be called upon to solve or to help to solve. What problem are we here to solve? What problem do you guys find yourself facing? Or what problem do you think you need to solve?
The corruption of the family.
Corruption of the family. Other problems from your perspectives?
No, go ahead.
Please, shout out. Go ahead.
Lack of values in relationships.
Okay. Values and relationships. Okay.
Misunderstanding what the person is.
Very good. Anyone else?
Getting information out.
Getting that information out.
Yeah, it's almost like influencing key leaders to come on board.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good. We're going to talk a little bit about leadership. Yeah.
Strategizing to try and combat a very left-leaning government.
Okay. Government. Very good. And you said you're from Canada.
Hey, are you talking about Canada?
All right. You could be talking about the United States. All right.
Harmful views of sexual activity.
Okay. Harmful views.
Disengaged
Views of society. Yeah.
Disengaged youth.
All right, disengaged youth. I was just at an event last week. We were talking about 1965. In the early 1960s, a lot of programs were started. One of them that I took part in, the White House Fellows, which was designed to bring disaffected youth, right, all those campus demonstrators, and get them involved in government. So that's not a new problem, but we are certainly facing it. Did anybody listen to the talk yesterday on the U.S. Supreme Court decision?
Yeah.
Did you hear Kathy Ruse speak?
Yes.
I heard she was good. My boss's wife. I didn't get to see. I was on an airplane. After that, do you think that in this country, I'll talk to Americans in particular, but anyone, any stakeholder, are we on the offense or are we on the defense? in the wake of that decision?
Both.
Both? How can we do both?
Well, we've always been on the offense because that's what we have to do. We believe in family, and anybody who believes in anything must always be sharing that knowledge. Anyone who has a conviction that they know is truth, they must always be on the cutting edge of sharing that. And then because of that decision, we've had the added task added of being on the defense. But in reality, we're always on the defense. That's always been true of anyone who stands for truth.
For defending something.
We always have to defend it.
Anyone else? Anybody disagree?
I think that we've historically been on defense. We've been defending our ideas of the family, of children, of all that. I think that maybe after the Supreme Court decision, we maybe are a little bit more to go on more of an offensive
Okay.
take.
From the Philippines, yeah.
I think the challenge is actually engaging the other side in conversation and dialogue. And I've been hearing this a lot from the speakers,
Yeah.
a committed civility from the pro-life movement side to actually, to act and to reason out in both love and truth.
Yeah.
Context.
Very good. You know, and as a former military, career military officer, I got to say that when I look across, you know, at some of our opponents, I don't see them as enemies, right? But they're our fellow citizens who are harboring a very dangerous idea. And so, yes, there are ways to speak about this as a fight, opponents, or as a match. And we're going to talk about that when we talk about strategy. So, but we need to be clear on what we're talking about. But it's important to get an idea of, are we offense, are we defense? We're going to talk more about that. Now, anyone from Europe? No one here is from Europe. This is Helmut von Moltke, the elder. He had a son. We'll talk about him when we talk about innovation. But Eisenhower would have studied him. Okay? He was a member of the German General Staff. He's wearing a very pointy hat, which means it's probably before World War I. But he's the one who really has inculcated into military strategists that a plan is a plan, be it a plan to invade Normandy, be it a war plan Orange, whatever plans we have now, but they don't survive first contact. Okay, and I think it's important when we start to talk about plan that these are not magic bullets. How many people have a plan right now in your organization? Has anyone done a strategic plan? You have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 strategic plans. Okay, so some of us have some experience. We're going to draw upon your experience too as we get through this. And of course, this famous pacifist strategist. If you haven't started planning, there's no time like the present. I don't know if Mahatma Gandhi said that, probably not. Actually, I think the quote's about 500 or 600 years old. But the best time, if you're in this room and you're starting to think about planning and think about strategic thinking, then you've already started to plan for how you, your organization, your family, your country, whatever it is you want to move to those goals that you just talked about. Here's where I come from. The first taste of this I had, I told you I was a career military, joined the military when I was 17, flew helicopters for 20 years. And I had a year in the Clinton administration. I worked for the Department of Commerce, and we had a new secretary come in who wanted a strategic plan. He wanted to assess the organization. And I was put in charge of running that strategic plan. We decided to hire an outside contractor, which we often do. Even if you're a small nonprofit, you end up doing that to get a fresh look. Got my contractor license, hired KPMG, and off to the races. A few years later, I found myself in my doctoral research. I was teaching at the Naval War College, and I ended up teaching strategic planning. Now that was fun because I was teaching guys who'd been steeped in tactics, right? These are the guys driving the ships and flying the airplanes, and they don't think strategically. So trying to get over that hump. When it was time to leave the Navy, I went to CFAM. Why did I leave the Navy? Well, to get married, of course, and have children. That's an excellent reason to leave. And got my dream job doing a pro-life and pro-family work in New York City. And I took CFAM through their first strategic planning session and helped them with their, we also hired an outside contractor. So I have a bit of a broad look at strategic planning, and I'm convinced that these principles can be used at any level. But let's talk about strategy. What do you think strategy is? I kind of put up some, mental line joggers up here. But when you think strategy, what comes to your mind?
Planning.
Planning,
basically
okay.
planning, yeah.
Very good.
Yeah.
How about our friend from Hong Kong? What is planning in Hong Kong, or strategy? Strategy.
From my point of view, a general direction and basic readiness for reaction to the challenges.
Good, okay. General direction, readiness?
Anticipating how your opponent is going to move.
Ah, okay, good. Kind of like the chessboard approach?
A set of plan A to B.
Oh, okay. Contingency, backups. Sounds very military.
Like actions you're gonna make to get to a specific goal.
Okay, actions you're going to take to get to a goal, all right? Remember these, yeah.
The end in mind.
End in mind, end in mind, okay. End in mind. Anybody else? Over here. Oh, very good, okay. All right. So in the military, we have to keep things extremely simple. They used to say, if you're talking to a Marine, you had to talk real slow and say it twice. So as a helicopter pilot, it's the same thing, you gotta keep it real simple. Strategy is getting from point A to point B in this context. Okay? This is, I'm just asking you to think of strategy as a bridge from here to there. A to B, where you are now with where you want to be. Now it sounds easy, but we got to do a lot of work before we know where we are, right? And a lot of work to figure out where exactly it is we want to go. But I want you to imagine this. I even like this cavernous ravine because sometimes it certainly feels that way, doesn't it? And that just that one little hole keeping up that bridge. And these elements are pretty simple. Who's seen these before? These are fairly straightforward. If you've done strategic planning, you have seen these. And I want to encourage you not to think of this as just checking the box. Okay, we got a vision, we got a mission, we got our guidelines, check, 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 check. We got our plan, we're ready. But that said, this is pretty simple. Okay, not easy, but very simple. We're going to take them in turn. Vision. Okay. A vision is where you want to be. All right? Where do you see yourself? It's vivid. It excites you. It's easily understood. It engages the troops. It's clear, it's simple. My brother spent 35 years in the military. He just retired and now he's interviewing, and his vision is now what he tells folks as his best accomplishment. This was his vision in his last deployment, and now it's his greatest accomplishment. He says, my vision was, I'm going to stand at the bottom of the brow of that ship, and I'm going to shake the hands of every single one of my troops. And then I'm going to watch them run into the arms of their families. But to get from here to there, from the beginning to the end, took a whole lot. How are you going to keep them safe? How are you going to get the mission accomplished? How are you going to make sure they're retained? How do you make sure that their families are going to be okay when they're gone? How do you know you're going to be there at the end? A lot went into it, but he had a very clear vision of what he wanted, and he worked toward that vision. And I can tell you what the vision of my organization is, but I'd like to hear from some of these other folks. What's the vision of the Ruth Institute?
You know, I was just looking.
Oh, she knew I was going to call on her. I was at the table today. Oh, no. It was your boss talking about it. It was Jennifer, right? She said it was a very clear vision of women who wanted husband, breadwinner, wife, homemaker, and 3 to 4 children. And it was a small group in the early 1900s, and this was their vision, and they worked with the government to achieve it. So it's a very clear vision for them. It might be a very difficult vision now to enact. But who else did a vision in their organization?
I have a vision of completely changing the understanding of personality studies and making them much more stable. Yeah.
Okay, so to make, my vision is that personality studies will be easily understandable
Yes,
by
accessible to mothers.
accessible to mothers.
Yeah.
Personality studies accessible to mothers. Okay? What do you guys think? Clear? Understandable? Compelling? All right? Who else? Who else had a vision? Sure, please come on up. Plug in. Who else had a vision for their organization?
So the pro-life work we do on campuses, our vision is to build a campus culture that respects and upholds the value of all human life, and specifically by supporting pro-life leaders in their outreach so they in turn can be leaders after university and the rest of society.
Okay, so break that down to one sentence. What's the,
We
what
just
is,
put like a colon there. So essentially we're here to build leaders, to build pro-life leaders that will be pro-life advocates in university and throughout the rest of their lives.
so a university that graduates a
Or not.
significant number of pro-life leaders.
Yeah, I guess you could say a university that graduates those leaders.
So you have a dozen pro-life leaders crossing the stage every single year from this university, going out to work in the pro-life field. Something,
A bit more concrete, I thought we could work with that.
you know, the reason this was the hard, I gotta admit, it sounds hard, this was impossible for us. When we tried to do this back in 2007, it was so hard. We waited till the very, very end. We did mission, we did values, we did mission again. We came, and vision was just so hard. And so we roped vision in way at the very end. So don't feel bad that vision's hard. In fact, we can come back to vision if you want, or guys who don't want to do vision, I'm gonna ask you about mission. And we just found a vision very, very difficult. So I just want you to imagine for a moment, you can close your eyes, or don't close your eyes if you don't want to, because I always get paranoid when people tell me to close my eyes. Because your back is facing the door, but you don't have to close your eyes. But imagine that your vision is to get down to the plenary after this. So I want you to imagine where you're sitting. Where do you find yourself? Are you behind that big screen? Are you in that first row where there aren't any seats in front of you? Do you want to get up close to ask a question? Do you want to stay in the back to be close to the food? But you imagine where you're going to be. There's an end state, and you can feel it, you can see it, right? It's something that's tangible. As we work through these, we talk about our mission. Your mission might be to get there fast, to get there slow, to get there safely. Your goals along the way would be to get out the door first, or to get to the elevator first. And then your values are the way you're going to do that, the values that you're going to take. Are you going to be collegial? Are you going to say, I'm sorry, I can't talk to you now? So all of these work together, and I want you to think about vision, this gigantic goal that you have. And I'm going to tell you what CFAMS was. We finally came up with a restoration of international law by discrediting radical social policies in international institutions. And it came from a movie that Austin had seen about 9/11, where they're rescuing people out of the rubble, and how hard it was to rescue something that was very dear to you. And that international law and international human rights protects people in many countries from grievous harm. And yet it's being abused, in fact perhaps even destroyed, because of an attempt to use it to push very radical policies that hurt people. So we had this idea of rescuing international law. We want to rescue it. But here's the vision that we have. You walk into CSW, we talked about this earlier, you walk into a UN debate, and the subject of abortion comes up, and everybody laughs. That's our vision. You walk into a debate, and they talk about many, many different types of families, and people are just like, that's ridiculous. That's our vision. That's the world that we work for at CFAM. That's the one we want to bring to international institutions. I think we're a long way away from it, but that's kind of the vision. Now, what your mission is going to be very different, because each of us in our organizations has a different mission. It's sort of it's your purpose. It's why you're getting there. So let me jog. It has to, again, be clear, simple. Will it keep you focused on the right things, like a laser beam? And does it tell your people why you're delivering that, why you're getting to that mission? So who can talk to me about mission? Who's already written up a mission statement?
I found what I was.
You found your mission
looking for.
statement?
I found the vision, mission.
Okay.
And the.
Okay, tell me your vision first of all.
The survivors of the sexual revolution changed the current and toxic narrative around sex, marriage, and family in order to create a cultural climate favorable to lifelong married love.
So the vision, actually, I think Jennifer gave a really good vision earlier. She wants to get all the people who ever made a mistake to talk about it and save the next
Right,
generation.
that's in our mission. So we,
Oh, that's your mission. Okay,
Yeah.
all right.
We inspire the survivors of the sexual revolution to recover from their negative experiences and to share their stories with the young.
What do you think? Clear? Good. Hallie? Okay. Anybody else? Who else has a mission? It can be from anything.
I have mine, but it's in Spanish. I'll try to
Okay.
translate. The mission is be the entity that promotes and defends the family tradition. Also the fundamental principles. And, well, basically it's getting the law into reflecting the law.
Okay.
And making an incidence in the powers of the state, the society, and in the family. Preserve the natural identity and maintain long-lasting permanence or
And this is the vision?
This is the mission.
The mission, okay.
And the vision is become the entity, the reference entity in Guatemala that defends systematically life, family, and religious liberty to preserve the real human rights.
Okay. So that's interesting. So your vision is to become the go-to organization. That's very clear, isn't it? So if you have a question about life, liberty, life, family, and religious liberty, you go. What's the name of your organization?
Asociación Familia Importa.
You're going to go to Asociación Familia Importa. That's where you go in your country. That's a very clear vision. Are you there yet?
No way.
Now, I would just suggest that that might be one of your what we call big, hairy, audacious goals. It might be a gigantic goal. It might not be a vision per se, a vision the way you want to find the world, because then it's sort of, okay, we're here, but now what change have we made? So my only recommendation would be that it is it's like almost a perfect audacious goal, right? It's a 10 or 15-year goal, 5-year goal, whatever it is. But for a vision and end state, you might want to connect it more to Guatemala itself or the environment. But we're going to do an environmental assessment and talk about that. That's not always easy to do. So did you get an idea of what mission is? So I wrote down CFAM's mission too. Of course I should have all of these completely memorized. So our mission is to defend life and family at international institutions and publicize the debate.
But that doesn't really match your definition of mission being why you are going there. That seems more like a goal of what you're doing, right?
Yes, it is it's the purpose, right? The purpose, why we're here. Why we're here is our purpose.
Okay, so it's for that.
To defend life and family. We talked about other things besides defend. I mean, each word, life and family, international institutions, not just the UN, because we also work in Europe. You know, so you're going to massage that. But to publicize debate is a big deal because we write 2 news stories every week that go out to over 300,000 people. And so publicizing the debate and learning how to write was a big deal for us. So that was, you know, that one actually came to us very easy. The next one I think most of us are going to find easy because most of us have some kind of a background in values, right, in ethics. We're rooted in some kind of religious tradition, certainly a family tradition, a tradition in our constitution or something where these are sort of organic. I find that the hardest part of this is just picking some and picking between, say, 3 and 5 values. And the values that you want are those very particular to get you to where you want to go. And sometimes we poo-poo these, let's pick a handful, okay, these, I mean, come on, who can argue with respect, responsibility? That's just great. But remember, you as the boss or you as the head of a department, you're not always going to be there when people are off, you know, traveling to the UN or to Utah, right? You're not always going to be there when your actual business gets done. So how do you know that when someone sits at her desk, does she go to a meeting? Does she answer the phone? Does she write a memo? Does she check her email? I mean, knowing what to do every day to get you toward that big goal takes everybody in the organization knowing what your values are, what your goals are, what your mission and vision are. So everybody has to be sort of seeped in the strategic thinking, and they really need to come back and have these, what we call touchstones, you know, what the old Greeks, the Greeks used to call those touchstones. So, so picking those that, in a pinch, okay, all right, I have no idea what to do, but I know what my values are because I had to memorize this. It's professionalism. All right, so professionalism is one of ours. And the reason we picked that is because as a scrappy activist, flame-throwing nonprofit, right? You don't want to always be seen that way, right? So you want to have, my boss insists that all the men wear suits. Not pants and jackets, but suits that match with ties. That we're always at the phone. The phone never, ever goes unanswered at our New York office. That's hard to do, right? Especially as a nonprofit, you're depending a lot on people coming and going. So we picked professionalism to always remind everybody who came through the door that's one of the 4 things that you're going to work on every day. Name some, what about your number? Do you have values? What's one of your
I
values?
don't know that we've worked on core values, to be honest. I don't think we have. I mean, I'm sure we have them, right? But I don't articulate them.
I work for a school, so one of the core values is like the student first. Like
Student
over
first.
like the business, the marketing, it's the student first.
Very good, yeah. Anybody else have theirs already prepared? Because I want to ask you about the pro-family movement, the World Congress of Families and the pro-family movement. Let's think about the pro-family movement that we're all in together. If we were an organization, or a coalition, what would our vision be?
Provide a healthy
What's it?
family.
An end state for all of us,
Image.
from all different countries. What would an end state of this
It's to
coalition?
strengthen the family.
Strengthen, okay.
Promote family?
Promote family,
Create and maintain lasting families.
create and maintain lasting.
Promote it as the fundamental unit of society.
Promote, okay. This one,
Protect life from the conception to natural death.
okay. Life, okay. Now let's think, vision, remember, is that picture in your mind. You go to any country in the world, you land, you get off the plane, you walk into the airport, walk down the street, and your vision is, right, strong, healthy, happy families and respect for human life from conception to natural death. And so that you have a very clear vision that this is global, that all across the world, when these notions come up that are against this, that they're sort of, they can't imagine it, right? So the mission of this coalition would be purpose, would be to get that done in different ways, right? What would you say our values are? If you had to pick just 4 values for our coalition, what would they be?
Well, I think collaboration.
Collaboration, okay.
Truth.
Truth, who said truth? Truth. Why truth?
Because the main force behind everything we do is that we want to share the truth with people. What truth? Natural family, and those are the branches of the main value of truth.
Okay.
Compassion and excellence.
Compassion and excellence. I should be writing some of these down. Truth, compassion, excellence. We had another one.
Collaboration.
Collaboration.
Intentionality, maybe?
What's that?
Intentionality.
What is that?
Like being intentional with sharing our message, being on the offense rather than the defense.
Okay.
Accountability,
Accountability. Why did you say that one?
because I guess I've heard a lot from the speakers talking about how like the truth that they stand up for comes from God. So like it makes me think of being accountable to God.
And maybe accountable to our stakeholders, right? I've been to a lot of feminist conferences, and one thing I learned is there is a way to get pro-choice or rescind laws, and that is to denigrate the pro-life side right before an election. They did this in Mexico City very successfully. Apparently, they planned to launch in the newspaper an allegation that the major pro-life organizations had misspent their money. And they didn't allow enough time for them to rebut it before the vote. And they have replicated this in other cities as well. But and that can be very, very damaging. But it can be even more damaging if there's ever any hint that maybe we're not as accountable as we should be with our money, good stewards of our money, with the truth. I mean, let's face it, fundraising letters? Come on, fundraising letters? You gotta get people really mad, right? But if truth is one of your core values, then your fundraising letters have to be really true too. In fact, we picked this as one of our core values, truth telling. it's really hard to do come fundraising time, right? Because you want to say, you know, they're killing the babies, they're taking your little girls, and okay, is that absolutely true? They're not technically killing them. You know, you really, and you need to be, because we're all accountable someday, right? So I agree, because in the long run, that's what makes an organization great. We're going to talk about great organizations. So the idea here is just to pick those values which you think you need at this time. And remember, these values are probably going to last long before you change. You might even change your mission, and you might change your end state, your vision. But core values usually stay. Okay? Now, the last part of this is picking goals and objectives. All right? Now, SMART, S-M-A-R-T, this makes it really easy. This is the thing I love about this stuff. It's real, it's jargon, but I gotta tell you, it's just as good jargon as anybody else's jargon, and it works. So, your goals have to be these are very specific, okay? So, let's see. Your vision is to get down there and sit in the front seat of the plenary. So, one of your goals is to be the first person at the elevator. Get there first. So, a sub-objective might be to sit in the back here so you can leave first. I mean, these are very, very specific. They're measurable. How do you know? I can measure it because I'm closest to the door. Now, achievable and realistic kind of go together because let's say you want to write a great research paper, a fabulous 3-year research project and get it published in a peer-reviewed journal. Is that realistic? Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, here's a scholar right back here. He's a teacher. That's realistic. Now, you have 6 kids, and your wife also works, and you know, and you don't really have that much time, and somebody got fired from work, so you're doing double time. Is it realistic? So we just have to look at some of the goals we set, and remember, these are like 3 to 5 year goals we're talking about. Yes, they could be completely achievable, but are they realistic given your personnel, given your financial outlook, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Time bound is very important. I said, you know, are you going to be able to write this research paper and get it published in a peer-reviewed journal in 3 years? So for a book deal, it's about maybe a 2 or 3 year process if you want to publish a book. Let's say you want to graduate those 12 pro-life leaders who are going to walk across the stage, and you want to do that in 3 years. So you've got to pick sophomores, you've got to pick juniors and seniors, or really smart freshmen, or whatever it is. So these need to be time-bound, and then all of your sub-objectives are going to come from that. You need to select them, you need to train them, you need to get people collaborating with them. Yes, ma'am.
And with the goals and the objectives, how do you come up with these standards? Because I say, like, I ask this because I think being young, we're often very ambitious, and we think that we can achieve things faster, do things more effectively, or, you know.
You don't like 3 years? 3 years is too long. That's an eternity.
You know, is it like, do you just ask people for their wisdom, their perspective, like, oh, how long did it take you? Like, is it just kind of like a general, like, wisdom?
Well, let's see. Your goal is to increase fundraising by 50% in the next 3 years. So if you're bringing in, let's say your organization brings in $10,000 a year, you want to bring in $15,000 in 3 years. Is that achievable? It's realistic? It's very tangible. They're going to be a lot of
people who've been in it.
Yeah, I would go talk to people. In fact, at your age, I highly recommend the informational interview. Like any one of these plenary speakers that wow, I really want that guy's job. Just go ask him for an interview. Say, can I talk to you for 15 minutes? I'll come to your office and meet with you. Just ask him, how'd you get it? How'd you get into it? In the plenary after this, that's the first question Austin's going to ask him. Sorry, I just stole his thunder. But how did you get into this business? And ask people how they got into it. And if you want specific things, how did you get so good at fundraising? Just ask them. I know a lot of people have already probably done this. Yeah. Go ahead.
Oh, me?
Yeah.
And I think that here there's another very important aspect, that these goals have to be assigned to a specific person or position, because in my experience, what's everybody's goal is nobody's goal, or what's everybody's task is nobody's task. But if you put a name or a position for every single goal, and something fails, you know exactly where in the chain or in the process the flow was broken, and you know how to fix it, and you can approach that person and say, okay, what happened here? What part of this is broken in your position?
And then you can tie it to things like their bonus.
Yes.
Et cetera, et cetera. I just want to make, this is very important, goals are not programs. Organizations love programs. Don't we love programs? Oh, we just love them. We've got our newsletter, we've got our fun, we've got our speaking, we've got, our international program, we just love programs. Programs are not goals, okay? Goals only last for 3 to 5 years, okay? Maybe just 3 years. And then it goes, and then you might revise it or you might get rid of it. But let's not get into the trap that they're the same thing, because then you're just going to say, okay, we've got a researcher, then we've got a researcher goal. We've got a writer, we've got a writer goal. We've got a fundraiser, we've got a fundraising goal. And that's not what we're trying to do here. We're really trying to get us out to that big, audacious goal out there of changing the world in a couple of years, getting all those graduates across the stage, or whatever it is we're trying to do. So yes, assign a name, absolutely, but not necessarily in his or her program, right? Developing your people should probably be a goal, right? You might not have a develop your people department, probably not if you're a nonprofit. But you should be sending them to Leadership Institute. You should be sending them to seminars like this. You should be going down to do PR or fundraising or media training, et cetera, et cetera. That might be. So that's a goal. And then objectives, of course, are what comes after that. The UN just passed the Strategic Development Goals. Did anybody pay attention to that? They have so many sub-objectives and indicators, it just boggles the mind. So don't be the UN. Don't put too many on there. Make it very achievable. Now, we're going to face the hard, brutal facts of where we are. But before we do that, just a couple of things to put in place. First of all, before I forget, who are your stakeholders? Who are the stakeholders for the pro-family movement?
Families?
Families are our stakeholders.
Children.
Children.
Society.
The whole thing. Whether you agree with us or not, you're a stakeholder in what we're doing. At least, I hope we believe that, otherwise I don't know why we're here. That's true. Other stakeholders. How about for an organization? Who's a stakeholder for you? For your organization?
Your donors.
Donors are big stakeholders. We invited our big donors to our strategic planning process. We had them sit in and help us decide who the heck we are, because we really wanted their perspective. Anybody else? Stakeholders?
Employees,
Your employees are your stakeholders?
your vendors,
Okay, good. Consultants, maybe?
our board.
Your board, certainly. That's good to get your board involved. If you have an active board, that's especially true. What about your competitors? Do we have competitors in this coalition? Are we really competing? Are we competing for donors or message or space? I mean, let's face it, those are great people to talk to about yourself. If you want to hold up a mirror, go ask your competitor. I don't really think that they do. I think that that's where you're going to, so that's why we often end up hiring an outside consultant to go and to talk to them, because they will talk to them anonymously and off the record, whereas they probably would not talk to the president of your organization if he said, what do you really think of me? Probably not a good way to run a coalition. So those are your stakeholders, and you want to get them involved. Whether you get them involved on the ground floor, you bring them into one of your planning sessions at, somewhere along the way, or just do anonymous interviews. You want them all involved, or you're not, or this is useless, right? Now I want to talk about core competence, because it's really important to understand what you do best. What you do best, what no one else does best. Because when you talk about your competitors, if you're redundant, right? If you're competing and somebody else is doing what you do better, then you're going to lose. Right? Because why would a donor give you money for something that somebody else is doing better? And you wouldn't want that, right? So, but all of us are here because we do something that God has called each one of us to do something uniquely, that we are uniquely suited to do. Otherwise, I don't think we'd be doing what we do. And we have a core competence. Okay, so I'm going to keep picking on people who have thought about core competence.
What we do best is to respond quickly and fastly to any emergency, because we're a small organization, so we go there and
So quick response to what? Crisis pregnancies?
No, quick response to like some present for a law, to go and lobby immediately for that state law, or to try to block something, even if it's going to be discussed at the floor at that time.
Very good.
So that's what we do.
Oh, we need you in Rhode Island. Please. We desperately need you in Rhode Island. Ugh. We're so apathetic sometimes. Okay. Core competence? All right, Ruth Institute, what's your core competence?
I just pulled it up here. Okay, the Ruth Institute is the best in the world at inspiring and equipping the survivors of the sexual revolution to share their stories with the next generation, to help them avoid the mistakes and challenge and 2, challenge the ideologies from previous generations.
Very good. I'd probably get it down to maybe a sentence, but yeah. CFAMS is understanding the social policy debates at international institutions. So we're the very best at that, and we want to be known as the best at that. And a lot of people work on these social policies at the UN, and we want to be the best and be known as the best. That's great. Okay, now, the flip side of that. Critical vulnerability. This is a military term. I'm going to read you the military definition, but I think that too often we don't spend enough time thinking about the brutal facts. This is right out of the joint military operations, okay? Critical vulnerability is an aspect of critical requirement which is deficient or vulnerable to direct or indirect attack that will create decisive or significant effects. In other words, if you lose it, huge impact, negative impact, okay? I put this here because, for the military, if we lose a ship, we have other ships. If you lose a base, you have other bases. If you lose a squad, you have other squads, okay? But if we were to lose what we call our critical infrastructure, just by its name you can tell, our critical infrastructure to an attack and it wiped it out, that would have an outsized effect, okay? So it's a small, if it's a small attack, huge effects, that's a critical vulnerability, okay? So it's either vulnerable, it's already weak, okay, or it's vulnerable. So think of that. For the pro-family coalition.
I'm sorry, I was gonna mention a military
Go ahead.
example.
Please.
Her discussion about Russia having their ships near the underground, what do they call it, underground wiring that, that's right, that connects the internet with Europe. If that were attacked, I mean, would that be considered a critical vulnerability, or because we have satellites, we'd still be okay?
Okay, so that depends on the effects. Right, so you asked the right questions. Would it or would it not be? I don't know. Depends. Some people say that Europe's energy architecture is a critical vulnerability.
Yeah,
Okay.
I think so.
So that, it has a large impact, right? It can be cut off, it would be a small input to attack, but have large effects, right, throughout society, so that could be considered a critical vulnerability. Now think about, yes ma'am.
Well, my husband told me, I don't know if that's true, that recently all the military in the U.S. are learning again to navigate by the stars.
Yes.
So then they might have found
Yes,
a
celestial navigation, I
vulnerability.
learned it in Annapolis, and it's so painful. At the end of 4 years, you take your disc and you just throw it out into the river, hoping you never have to do it again. But yes, you should be able to navigate by the stars. That is redundancy, and it's something that's very important. But now I want to bring it back to nonprofits. What would be a critical vulnerability in your little organization, or large organization?
Lack of donors.
Lack of donors, okay? Nobody wanted to give you money.
Corruption within.
Corruption from within.
Yes.
That's good.
Yeah, okay.
And the
All right,
real
wow,
problem,
okay.
yes.
Anybody else? So yes, please.
Loss of vision.
Loss of your vision.
I was talking to the WOW, the Worldwide Organization of Women,
Yeah.
and that happened, they were taken over by an anti-family, anti-women.
Oh, okay.
or feministic
So your leadership
group of
might be
people.
critical vulnerability.
Yeah, and so they had
Ah,
to
very
reclaim
interesting.
their organization
Huh.
for after about 8 years.
Ah, okay, yeah. Critical
There was recently a lot of news about this website that was, connecting men to extramarital
Yeah,
affairs,
right.
and
Ashley
there
Madison.
were some, exactly,
Yeah.
some leaders of some family related organizations that they found were involved, and that's a critical
Now, is that-
hit.
So reputation would be a critical vulnerability?
Right. You're trying to defend the family, but then you're kind of undermining your own family.
Now, it would be a critical vulnerability for that one organization. Would it be a critical vulnerability for the entire movement?
Yes.
You think so?
Not necessarily.
I know that at least, maybe not on a wide scale, but I know at least talking to like people my age, they who don't have a lot of education about the history of our movement or the other movement
Yeah.
will just associate one name with the entire group.
Sure, sure, okay. Okay, so because of the outsized effects of the media, for example, it could be a critical vulnerability. Interesting, all right, yeah.
For example, I think in the cases in which Catholic priests have been involved in a lot of scandals, it does affect the rest of the movement.
Okay.
Even if it's not within the Catholic Church.
Yeah, it has had an outsized effect. Yeah.
I think a great example of this would be Planned Parenthood and just the abortion sector has corrupted the name.
Corrupted their name? Oh, good, so when we haven't talked about the other side's strategy, okay? I do give talks on looking at the other side's strategy and understanding the other side's strategy, although we're not going to talk about it in here, but it is important to, your strategy, that's why I asked you at the beginning whether you think your offensive or defensive strategy, because it is important to understand what the other side, what their strategy is, because you want to find their critical vulnerability, right?
We want the critical vulnerability to be death of leadership.
It could be. This depends on whether you have a lead, whether you put something like this plan in place. I have to tell you, there are leaders who do not build their companies to last. And building them to last, we're going to talk about being built to last. But yes, some organizations rely on a very charismatic figure. They don't build an organization to last beyond their tenure, and it probably won't. But that's why this type of planning is so important, because if you have this plan in place and everyone in the organization understands it, and even if you have a board on, in place they can hire, then you can get a new leader and you can continue the mission. Because let's face it, if our mission is to make sure that families everywhere are loved, protected, and thriving, this is a very long-term mission, and it's going to probably outlive any one charismatic leader for any one of our organizations. So it could be a critical vulnerability of the organization, and I take that very seriously, especially if you have a tiny little organization, right? You can't grow from within. We decided our critical vulnerability was funding. Someone over here said donors. We called it funding because it's the only thing that could shut us down, right? There was a time when, before I got there, that there were only two left in the office, and they were going to go on food stamps. They said, we're just going to go on unemployment, and we're going to keep this little organization open. We're going to keep faxing, and it was literally the Friday fax, we were faxing and faxing. We're going to keep this open. But then our opponents did us a huge favor. There was an organization called Catholics for Choice, and they decided they wanted to kick the Vatican out of the UN, and they launched this big campaign called the Sea Change campaign. Donations went up, we stayed in business. We've been there for the last 18 years. So sometimes, we're going to talk about this when we talk about our environment. Sometimes those threats can be an opportunity. Okay, but that was, we determined, was our critical vulnerability. It's really good answers in here, especially things about leadership and corruption and things like that. That's why it's so very important to stick to our values, isn't it? Okay, well, we're ready to do that assessment, all right? We're going to look at the hard facts, and we're going to look at the environment that we are in, and that we're in together. I want to do this as a group exercise, because I want to really get the lay of the land here as a coalition. We're from all over the world. The landscape has changed dramatically here in the United States. So if I was only talking to Americans, it would have a lot to do with the Supreme Court decision. But I talked to UN delegates at the UN, and one of the things they always talk to us about is what are we going to do now? Because a lot of the pressure comes from the State Department, a lot of it, the money comes from USAID, and they get tremendous pressure from congressional delegations, et cetera. So part of the US picture also has to do with the international picture, but not all of it, okay? So a lot of this we face together. China announced today at the finishing of their plenary at their party congress that ended today, Thursday their time, that they were going to quote unquote abandon the one-child policy, but it's only a two-child policy, which means everything is still intact. They're still able to coerce and force, and you have to get permission, et cetera, but they've just changed the number from 1 to 2. So what does that do to the environment there? I mean, there are these shifts that you have to decide, oh, well, what is that? So the first part of this exercise we're going to do is to look at our organizational strengths and weaknesses, all right? And we're going to look at the environment and say, well, what are the opportunities and threats? So as I said, sometimes a threat can be an opportunity. We don't know. But let's talk about our strengths. Let's see. All right. Does everyone have paper? Because there's paper over there and there are pens over there. If you want to get up and stretch your legs or just pass the paper out, we're going to need it. We are going to need that. Okay, why is this not on? Go ahead, get a pen, get some paper.
Oh, it's just they don't need paper. Pen?
Great thing about this is I do not need a computer to do this exercise. But I would like to bring this back. Oh, okay.
Yeah, we'll take some.
Oh, sure. Oh,
Okay, oh,
okay. So we're going to start with good news. Now on your paper, would you please write down your own organization's strengths and also coalition, if you can think of it, just write down some strengths in general. I bet you some of them are going to be overlapping because we're all in this together. Some of them are going to have to do with your core competence. I asked you to kind of start with core competence of your organization because you're always going to get that up there first. That's your particular strength. So let's start with those. And then I want you also at the same time to think about weaknesses.
We're just working on strengths right now, right?
Strengths and weaknesses. If you're thinking about strengths, you can think, probably a good time to think about weaknesses too. That was the first question in the presidential debates last night. In those awfully professional and fair. So what's wrong with you? Why would you not make a great president? What's your greatest weakness? I just work too hard.
Yeah.
Too many people like me. I care too much. I care too much about all my people. And yet I get so much done. Yeah. We've all been through the interview process. Now, keep in mind, you're going to be doing this over a series of weeks and months when you do this with your organization. And you're going to probably be asking them to think about it at home, mulling it over, and really vetting these. So, but let's get some of them up on the board. Who wants to start? Strengths. I'll always start with the good news. And this could be strengths of the pro-life, pro-family coalition, or it could be strengths of your particular organization. So whatever you want to share as a strength.
Unity of vision.
What's that?
Unity of
Unity of vision. All right. What do you mean by that?
I think one of the lessons of working within this movement is that we're all very motivated by very similar values and of a vision. I guess I say vision and values there.
Okay.
And so I think that does bring some unity.
Now, do you mean vision as the kind of vision we just did, or more of,
I think more so the vision we just did, but I guess it could go a couple different ways there.
well, actually, we did have pretty similar visions, but yeah. Okay. Strengths?
Passion.
Passion. Yes. Do you know any non-passionate pro-family? I work with some. They got fired.
And you'd put that like as something that we do better than the people who are pro.
Well, that's a competitive advantage, but yeah, you know, when you think of strengths, since there could be so many.
Yeah, I would put intellectual like smartness, like we you know, like logic, rationale.
I think that's very
Ethical
valid.
rationale,
I think
maybe?
that's very valid because
Okay.
the other side, it's not rational.
Yes, the only
It's
without knowledge.
emotional, but
They
not
start from
rational.
different premises, though. I thought a lot about this. The other side starts from different premises, and then they do follow logic out from that premise. So I don't know that I agree that they're illogical.
But the
I
premise
think
is often irrational.
Well, would you say then?
Depending on your ethical standards.
Right, see,
So
that's the
that's why I would
thing.
add ethical rationality.
Okay, ethics, our strengths are ethics.
We're saying the
pretty good
strengths of this organization.
Okay.
Truth.
We have science.
Truth.
Truth, all right, that's another way to, let's say, or we start from truth, they might start from someplace else, okay? Or thinking like us and them, that's okay, that's okay.
Science. We have science.
Science on our side, you know, this is very specific, you know, in the pro-life movement, we started with science, right? We started with science, we had in our textbooks, you had human development. It was all taken out in the 70s and 80s, right? But now you've got 3D ultrasound, you've got DNA. We definitely have science, I mean, as a strength of our side. So the pro-life movement,
Social science as well.
science. I would say the pro-family movement has this too, if you're looking at public health issues, etc., although we haven't really exploited science. We've had a very robust conversation about this. The UN just put out a report, UNFPA, put out a report showing that men who have sex with men have much, much higher rates of so many diseases. Now, if that had been published by one of us, it would have been hate speech, but it was published by the UN, and it was published, you know, their goal then is to help empower these folks by getting them destigmatized, etc. But the fact is, the science is certainly, they can use it their side, we can use it for our, sure. It doesn't matter because, you know, I think sometimes we forget, and this could be all kinds of public health, it could be social science.
Of course, with science, the information is always updated. So as a strength, having all this, well, with all the statistics, you have updated information, and it's in global soul, that's true. It's updated, and well, yeah, you are informed. You're educated by the topic. So that's most of it, the strength of all of the organizations.
Okay.
That's real. That's nothing you made up. So, yeah.
So does that fit within one of these? Just want to make sure
It
we
would
get
fit
it up there.
it actually englobes with rationality, truth,
Okay.
and science.
Okay.
Because
Good.
it's updated information.
Good. Because when we start to talk about opportunities, we want to draw upon some of our strengths, right? So it's important to get real concrete ones up there, yeah.
I think integrity is a good one because
Okay.
like that's what causes us to have a unity of vision. We all trust each other, and you see all the shenanigans that go on in the other side, and there's just disharmony, and they don't work together.
Really?
Like they do,
I
but they
wish
don't.
they didn't.
They don't. They don't trust each other.
I feel like they're all organized.
They don't trust each other as deeply.
Oh, okay, yeah, that fundamental trust, based on biblical truths
Yeah.
or something, yeah. Okay, true, that's probably true, although there is an ideological, I have to say, there is a bond amongst some that is progressivism, for example. I mean, it is a strong belief that there's a certain way to do it, that government can empower you to help people in certain ways, or to change. So first of all, very powerful, strong government. For example, it shows up everywhere. In law, it shows up that our Constitution is this living document, right? It's not written and steady. So progressivism, in a way, does have its own kind of religion, and its own priests and its own texts and documents and things like that. Although, then you gotta come back to some of this good stuff up here. Anybody else? Strengths?
I was just thinking the value of our product.
The value of your product. What's your product?
Yeah, and that could be seen both ways. Because what we're fighting for, talk about, truth and ethics, but I think what we're fighting for, whether it be, with families or marriage or whatever, that has so much value to it.
The common good. The value, your product is the common good.
Yeah, so if if you're marketing a product that's excellent, it's a lot easier than if you're marketing a product that's not so good.
Okay, I've kind of put words in your mouth, but I'm going to say common good. We often, this is sort of a legal term also, and it is often misunderstood. It's not just, good that most people want, but it is the good which is common to all, right? And often we're fighting folks who have interest groups or particular interests, and they're working to empower a certain group, whereas we are arguing that we are fighting for the common good. And so we keep coming back to these sorts of things to show that, no, this is a common good. This is good that is common to all. Families, it's good for, if somebody wants to pay into your Social Security, you're going to need families. If, you want to have a healthy economy and you want to be able to sell your house in 30 years, yeah, this is common good we're talking about. So that's a good product. That's a good product to market. Okay, let's talk about weaknesses.
Lack of donors.
Money! Okay, I'm going to put the dollar sign up here because I can't draw the euro. I never remember how to draw it. But dollars, yeah, donors. And not just money, but donors. That's a good point because, for a lot of us, we depend on many, many donors, not on government programs. So since we're not, and we don't even believe in big, gigantic government programs, do we? We believe in, grassroots. And I would have put that over here in strengths. We are far more grassroots and less elite. And grassroots has a lot of strength to it. It means that you can go to the polls in 31 states, right, and actually vote in favor of marriage. So we already have the hearts and minds. Now, they might have the power at the top, they have the elite, but we have grassroots, and I think that's something to remember. So number of donors, that could be a weakness, but it could also be a strength, right? Because they don't have the number of donors that we do. We have far, far more in the aggregate. But getting them, that's why you need a strategic plan. Weaknesses.
Stereotypes.
What do you mean by
that? We are commonly attacked and our argument is said to be lack of value because we follow faith sometimes and because our beliefs are associated with lack of rationality.
Okay.
Is that a weakness or a threat?
Religious.
That's, would that be more of a threat?
It's a perceived weakness.
Irrational.
Yeah.
Yeah. How about mean? Are we seen as mean? Sometimes I just feel. How about mean? Are we seen as mean? Sometimes I just feel mean. If you write something that says that you're against marriage between people of the same sex, it's just so mean. So I think those stereotypes. You just don't want to be a mean. Yes, sir.
Wouldn't stereotypes go under threats as in stuff that get in your way?
Sure. So a weakness is that we are vulnerable to this type of stereotype by somebody. Who is that? Like the media?
Yeah. Yes.
So we heard it, boy, you heard it in the debates last night, the media. So the media is kind of a threat, isn't it? Because it doesn't matter what Pope Francis says about life in the family, because the only thing we're going to hear is what the media says he said. And what does that do? It divides us, right?
The manipulation of the
right? And that division, that's the work of the devil, dividing. So I think that we do face a challenge here, but then again, I would say that one of our strengths, maybe we didn't put up here, is that we communicate so well. Gosh, we've got grassroots letters, we've got electronic letters, we've got all kinds of things. So,
So you're touching on it, so I'm going to just give you an example, and then you'll have to take it from there, what you want, how you want to apply this. But one of the universities in this state here teaches government. Students of government who are going to go into government and who are going to be the directors of school districts and things like that. They teach them to create contention. So the specific example that's given to me is the school board directors are taught to go individually to each board member and tell them different amounts of truths about different things, so that when they come together in their board meetings, they are inevitably opposed to each other, so that then the district leader can rule over the school board because he keeps them opposed to each other and constantly fighting, infighting. So I don't know how you would describe
What do you
that.
think of that?
But that is what that is their taught university level
Okay.
strategy in dealing with us.
Or I'm going to say university, if one of our goals, and we didn't write this down as a goal, but one of our goals is to be able to retire someday and to let the next generation take over the fight, or also win the fight in our lifetime. Okay, both of those very noble goals. But if we want to grow the next generation, we need young people coming in, right? So one of our threats are our universities.
Public education.